All right, let's get into it. Remember, we are talking about parenting and substance use. This is a series of discussions that we started at the beginning of this month, of course, in partnership with NACADA, to just try and see how we can employ positive parenting during this time that we are fighting this COVID-19 crisis. Now, joining me in studio this morning, we have Susan Maua, who is the acting manager in charge of public education and advocacy, working with NACADA. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
So today we're talking about parenting and substance use amid COVID-19 and just trying to demystify some of the myths and excuses that we give as parents.
Oh, yeah.
But let me just start with one thing that I came across yesterday. There has been a noted increase in the purchase of alcohol during this time. And looking at a place like the States, it has increased by 55% since March only. Why do you think this is so? Because this is now the adults who are said to be stockpiling.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You know, use of alcohol is actually a coping strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it means that you, in your bank of coping mechanisms, you don't have enough. So you always think of something else that can make you get lost.
To reinforce your coping mechanisms.
You know, when you are intoxicated, it means you are a little bit out of touch. Yeah. So if the issue was your wife, you know, you can forget that she exists until you sober up and you find she's still there.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is why use of alcohol is not a very good coping mechanism, but that is actually what happens, because you look at the stressors, the stressors that are there, like now being stuck in the house, maybe you don't have much to do, or your children are there, you've not been talking to them previously, your spouse is also there, you have actually been existing in the house, then suddenly you find yourselves. So you see, those are stressors, and that brings out negative emotions. So when you add the stressors and the negative emotions, then you bring in alcohol, which unfortunately is a depressant, to depress you further.
Thinking it's going to help you deal with it.
Yeah.
But then also this phenomenon of, you know, this stockpiling of alcohol has also been termed as a perfect storm for abuse, for drug and alcohol abuse, especially for our children. Do you think this is so because we are providing them with all these options that we think are good for us as adults, but actually is an opportunity for abuse when it comes to our children?
Oh yeah, it is, because remember that you're talking of children, a young person, a growing brain, one that does not have a lot of coping mechanisms. So now if you're showing that this is one of the ways that you can, then you're actually slowly destroying. And that is why you see eventually we now talk of addiction. Because you see, the more you use, you develop tolerance, and over time you find yourself in a totally different environment where if you wake up, you must use it. Yeah. And it is something that happens progressively. So you see, as you're stockpiling, what you are actually demonstrating to the children, this is how it's done. Yeah.
All right. And that actually just brings me to now the next part of this conversation. You know, what are trying to understand what are those reasons that, you know, push our children and young adults into indulging in alcohol and drugs, and especially now that they are at home. And the biggest one is, you know, when the parents are indulging. Now, this sort of reinforces their ideas and, you know, their beliefs about alcohol. Tell us a bit about that.
That's why we're actually having this conversation, because remember, all these things are based on the NACADA research that we did. And it shows that children begin to use because of the adults in their lives. It is their parents, it is their brothers, their sisters, it is those parties you have at home. It is all those things that you do that actually makes children see this is actually what should be done. I would also want to do the same. So that is one reason. Now, the other thing is, particularly when you talk about teenagers, you know, teenagers, it's actually a transition point of crossing from childhood into adulthood. There are a lot of things that are happening in your body as a young person. So it means that even your curiosity level is up. Yeah. So, and particularly if your parent is going to be talking about don't, then I'm going to do the opposite. I said, okay, well, why are they saying this? Let me find out. That is why you need to give reasons rather than saying, because I said so. Yeah.
Again, that blanket statement, because I say so because I'm the parent,
Yeah.
could also be more destructive than useful as we might think as parents.
Yes, yeah.
So curiosity is also another reason as to why, you know, our children tend to indulge.
Curiosity, and then again, peer pressure, because they are likely to do what others are doing. And, you know, the interesting thing is young people have a tendency of thinking everybody is using. Yeah. So because you want to be everybody,
they want to be left behind.
They don't want to be left behind. But as they're saying everybody is using, then ask them, name those who are using. Then you find they can't even get to 5.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's more of a perception like, I want to be like everybody. Everybody is using, so let me also use.
Let me jump on that bandwagon.
So peer pressure
is also another big problem. Now,
Uh-huh.
looking at this situation that our children were just plucked out of school and thrown at home, so many of them did not, or rather still don't have a schedule as to how, you know, their day is structured. So you find they get bored so much. Do you think this idleness and this sense of boredom could also be contributing to them wanting to indulge in alcohol and other substances?
Yeah, idleness is also one of the things. And unfortunately, we have got our children to only think academic. Yeah, so they are not able to develop the skills, actually the life skills that they require, including how do you use your free time? Because you see, in the school environment, all the time is used. You know, like high schoolers, I don't know about primary, but high schoolers, probably they have to wake up at 4 a.m., you know,
morning
and run,
preps.
morning preps, and run through until 10 p.m.
Yes.
You know, that is exhausting. So basically, it means that this child never has any time, including games time, PE. You know, physical education, you're supposed to go and jump around. Now, if that doesn't happen, then it means that this person never learns how to use free time. When they get home, the schools also send them with homework. Then the parents, if that is not the case, then they would want to get them into tuition, or they would want to take them to some camp organized by the church, or many other things. So this person never gets to learn, how do I use free time?
To manage their free time.
And that's a skill. That's a skill that you need to learn, so that, you know, without the gadgets, of course. Yeah, because free time does not mean engaging with the gadgets. Yeah, so how do they learn to just use the free time?
And use it constructively, for that matter.
And that is how they are going to learn that this is constructive way of doing it, and so on. So that even on their own, they can sit down and say, I think I need to create some time to do my maths. I need to create some time to do some drawing. Oh, what else would I want to do? Oh, I will just sleep. You know, I walk around or engage in some kind of sport and so on.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, also we have seen so many parents having to, you know, being forced to take leaves or having to work from home. And consequently, when they're still working from home, there's very minimal parental supervision that is involved with the children.
Yeah.
Could this also be a predisposing factor to children wanting to experiment and, you know, indulge in alcohol and other drugs?
Yeah, because remember, other than just the supervision, like I said, we have been existing in this house.
Yes.
Yeah, we barely talk to each other. Maybe in the morning, everybody take your breakfast, rush to school, hi, and then in the evening, you probably as a parent, you are going to evening class, especially in the cities. So now you actually do not have time. Now, when it comes to supervision now, you know, when you finally find yourself together, so what do we do? Because supervision is not sitting together.
Yes.
That is not supervision. It's more of, you know, checking with the person, but also giving them space to be able to do those things. So parental supervision is also another thing. And you know, if you've not been doing it before, you're not going to start doing it now.
It's not something you just jumpstart and get onto.
Yes,
it's something you build progressively.
And that's why the child, you know, if you've not been talking to them before teenage,
yeah,
and then suddenly you find that you want to talk about, what do you even start talking about? And that's why many times people ask us as NACADA, so how do I begin to talk to my child about drugs? You have not been holding a conversation before, so how do you just, you know, out of the blues, how do you begin to talk about that? You're likely to shout, you're likely to say all the things that you're going to regret.
And they always say, don't just be a parent to your child, be a friend to your child as well. And that way you're able to foster that freeness with your child so that when they get to that teen phase, when they're said to be rebellious, it's easier to navigate those waters as parents.
Yeah.
Now, let's come back to this, some of these causes, and let's talk a bit about, popular media. Children have so much access to TV and the internet right now that they are at home. How is this impacting them when it comes to their relationship with alcohol and drug use?
Right now, if you look at the kind of media that you have, like now if you go to Twitter, you will find there are all these adverts that are there.
Yes.
So it means that I can click and I can find more information. I can do purchases because there's no way of checking my age and so on. Go to Facebook, you're going to find the same. Now let's come to the basics that you see on your screen that comes in the form of cartoons. As a parent, if your child is hooked to a given cartoon, you need to just go through it and see what is this cartoon about. I was actually shocked one time when my children are older, so I no longer check on those, but I was actually surprised that some of the cartoons, we'll even be talking about, today they have characters of lesbians and gays and so on. Yeah. So you see, there are a lot of things that are coming in that you don't know. Now look at our music. Yeah. Music. You will find that in the music videos, there is always alcohol as part of the music, or there is smoking. Yes, there is smoking of cannabis. There could even be smoking of cigarettes. Remember, we don't advertise tobacco anymore, but it will come in the form of the music.
Yeah.
So you see then, if this is entertainment and at the same time it is demonstrating this is how we entertain ourselves. Yes.
So popular media does have a very big role, especially now that we are letting our children just indulge and indulge and indulge. And, arguably so as parents, you don't have time, especially if you have a number of children, you find it hard to just sort of keep it up with them. So you tend to just throw a gadget at them.
We don't have as many children. Think of our parents. How many did they have? 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. And they were managing all of you. But today we just have one child, 2 children, at most 5. Yeah. Actually, on average, it's between 2 to 5. 2 to 5. That is where you're going to find. Yes, most parents. So it means, and that is why when we talk of quality time, which is 10 minutes per child, you can actually afford, if you had 5 and you had quality time, which is 10 minutes per child, that is 50 minutes of your time.
So we just overthink the situation.
Yes, yeah. So it's really within our scope, and that is why we are having this conversation. Because if we are going to prevent drug use, then we must start from where it all starts, and that has to do with the parents.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, before we get to move on to the next phase of this discussion, let's talk a bit about how increased stress is also leading our children to indulge in alcohol and other drugs. And, as parents, we tend to think our children are not stressed. They have food, they have clothes, they have gadgets, they have shelter, they can go to school when schools will be allowed to reopen. But when it comes to this increased stress on our children, as parents, we tend to overlook.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that and how it's contributing to their redirecting to alcohol.
It's interesting to hear 2-year-old say, I'm stressed. Yes.
You wonder.
and that is because a lot of us talk about stress. Yeah? Sometimes you tell the children, oh, you are stressing me. And they don't even understand what this stress is. Stress must be when you are talking to somebody. Yes. You want them to hear something and they do not want, oh, that must be stress. Yeah. So children also go through stress. Yeah. Because let's talk about the high school person. When they get to Form 1, they are so excited. Yeah. And as they get excited, there are new subjects that you're going to learn. You're in a new school, term 1 is where you score 90s and 80s and so on. But as you move on progressively, yeah. First of all, the fact that you need to wake up so early and you have to, stretch from 4 a.m. to 10 p.m., that is already so much. Every teacher who comes to class gives work. Yeah. Now as they come home, they actually need a rest. Yeah. So that's why for me, I'm glad that, Dr. Matiang'i actually made it possible that school breaks are there.
Yes.
And when they go for holidays, they actually need time to
relax.
You just need time to get off it. Yeah. Because when they come back, if they have time to just do more than just academic. Academic work is very stressful because the parent expects so much from you.
Absolutely.
The teachers expect so much from you. That in itself is very stressing. And then you add to yourself as a growing person. As you transit from childhood into preteen, into teens, there are hormones, there is pressure. There is pressure from trying to meet the expectations of your peers, the sense of belonging, you want to do. So all these things are happening at the same time. The media is also showing you something else. Yeah. So the need to want to belong then becomes so much. So then you put all these things together because each one of them has expectations, and again, you also want to remember we talked about the issues of esteem. If esteem is low, you always feel like, no, they will not even like me. Yeah, I would want to be like them. So if they are drinking, then I would also want to drink so that I am like them, so that they don't look at me and think that, I'm a sissy or something like that. Yeah.
So as parents, we need to stop presuming that our children are not stressed.
Yeah, they are.
And especially when they come to talk to us, let us take time and listen to them.
That is why we must create time to actually listen. This quality time is not where you ramble on as a parent. It is time you are getting into the space of the child. Let them
listen.
Let them just tell you about what they are going through. They could even be going through bullying, because bullying is also something that is real, even in our own context. So how do they, when they get into this point where they see a girl or a boy that they like, that also becomes another stressor. How do they deal with this? But now, if as a parent you did not even open these channels, who do they talk to?
Becomes a problem.
Yeah, it becomes a challenge.
We are talking about positive parenting and how we can take advantage of this time to make the most of this time with our children, build on those relationships and reinforce them. And today we are particularly focusing on the relationship between alcohol and drug use and our children amid this crisis that we are in. Now, I want us to now move on to the next phase of this discussion and just try to understand some of these excuses that we give as parents when it comes to our children interacting with alcohol and drug use. And the biggest one that most parents always go with is in regards to faith. Mtoto wangu hajui mambo ya pombe, haja interact nayo, so they cannot use. We presume that because we are, faith-based family, our children haven't interacted with these things. How is this detrimental to our children?
Then what happens is you use religion now like a carpet.
Yes.
Yeah. Because whose faith are you talking about? We as a family, we are Christians. So does that make your children Christian? Do they believe in the same things that you're talking about? How about the fact that even the church, for example, is using wine? The church is also using wine for communion.
Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes when we do the surveys, you ask, when was the first time you ever used alcohol? It is church. It is church, when they actually went for Holy Communion and so on. Yeah, so just hiding under religion and not addressing the issues, because remember, your child does not just interact inside your house. And then even if you're religious, why don't you use that same Bible, for example? Because the Quran must also be having, but why don't you just use that same faith? Because even the Bible says, train up a child
in the way they should grow.
In the way that they should, so that when
they're old, they don't depart from it.
Yes, they do not depart from it. You see, that means that even the Bible is telling you, don't just take it for granted.
Yeah.
Just because I am a Christian, then things will just happen. Things will just happen. You must hold that conversation. You must make a conscious effort to train the child in the way that you want them to go. So that even when the peer pressure will come in and so on, yes, they will get attracted to their peers and so on, but they will always remember
at the back of their
minds, my mother, my father does not approve of this. Yeah. So you see, you have already put something in their heads.
Yes.
Yeah. But when you leave it,
you are preparing yourself for more problems in future.
Yeah.
So don't just use a blanket cover just because you may be religious. Remember, your child does not spend the entire time with you. They have other environments where they interact with other people, and those could expose them to this alcohol and drugs. Now, another excuse that most parents use is that it is normal for children to experiment.
Oh, yes, it is normal for children
let them experiment with alcohol and other drugs. It's
normal for children to experiment. Yes, so then if yours is experimenting, then
it's fine.
Then it is fine. You know, that is not fine. That is not fine because the truth of the matter is so many of them are not using and have never even experimented. Yes, and you see, it is that use that progresses into abuse and can eventually become an addiction. Yeah. So it is not true that children are experimenting. If you experimented as somebody who was growing up, yeah, that does not mean that
it's the same case for your children.
It is the same case because probably in that environment that you were, compared it to today's environment, is totally different because probably when you're growing up, you did not have all these pressures that are coming in form of media, in form of, you know, your peers, in form of your parents, in form, there's so many things around you that are happening.
All right.
If you let your child do that, then they are going to get into much more trouble.
So do not presume that, you know, since you experimented, your child might also want to do the same.
You are not even going to tell them that you experimented because if you do, remember we said children will do what their parents do. You know, it is monkey see, monkey do. So if you're going to say, oh, you know, I also experimented, I say, if daddy did, then it's just,
fine.
Yes, yeah. You know, this is just part of growing up.
All right.
So they're also likely to do that.
To go the same, down the same road. Now, when it comes to parents who have, you know, children who are in the preteen and the teen phase, most of them always say that, oh, my children are rebellious, they don't listen to me, they don't care what I say. So even if I tell them about drug and alcohol, they'll not listen to me. And we use this as an excuse as parents to avoid this conversation. Is this doing more harm than good to our children?
It is because, interestingly, research has actually shown that children, if you ask them who they would want to get that information from, it's actually the parents. Yes. So it is the parents, whether you're talking about things on sexuality, you're talking about, let's just say, risky behavior, including alcohol and drug use. It is actually their parents they would want to hear from. And remember that they may look like they are not listening to you because, you know, they will roll their eyes, they will say, oh, no, because
body language.
Probably you give a lot of instructions and counter instructions.
Yeah.
That when you call them, they say, oh, no, here she is again. Yeah. So as they do that, it doesn't mean that they are not listening to you. You can actually ask them, so what have I said? And they will tell you one by one what you have actually said. Yeah. Because remember that you matter. You matter to your children so much. Yeah. That whether you approve or disapprove something is so important to them. And that is why they would want to hear it from you. If they don't hear it from you, then they are going to hear it from third parties who don't care. Yes. Yes. People who don't care about them are the ones who are going to tell them.
And that will lead to more damage.
Yes. So by the time you realize something, then it has gone so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cannot be reversed.
Probably they have even committed suicide. And then you realize, oh, you know, these are some of the things that have been happening.
All right. Yeah. So as a parent, always try to be the reference point for your child when it comes to these pivotal conversations in our children's lives. Now, before we get to wind this conversation down, we always talk, you know, as parents, you know, it's what we started with this conversation, the fact that, you know, parents are stockpiling during this time and, you know, they're thinking, okay, ini yangu, ini soda ya wazee, na ini soda ya watoto. You even have categories in the fridge. So as a parent, we tend to say, okay, yeah, I'm an adult, I can use, and you tell your child when you grow up, that's when you will use. But showing them that, you know, since I'm an adult, I can use alcohol and other drugs, and, you know, since you're a child, you cannot use. How is this impacting rather children when it comes to their interaction with alcohol and drug use?
Remember that when you talk of communication, it's more of what you do rather than what you say.
Okay.
Yeah. 25% may be verbal. 75% it is non-verbal. So what are you demonstrating? By having it there, by taking it in their presence,
Yes.
you're actually demonstrating that it is okay to do this. Yeah. So remember, we've already said that you matter to your children. So whatever you do, they are going to do exactly that. And remember, they are not able to conceptualize that this is for adults. So they are going to be thinking, oh, when I get to 18. Sometimes when you hear children say, oh, when I grow up, I would like to be like my dad. Yeah, probably you would want to ask them, what exactly about your dad would you want to be like? Yeah, probably he sits there and reads the newspaper and does nothing when he comes to the house, or when he's there, you know, there are all these things. You would want to find out what else. Yeah, because also tied to that are parents who think, oh, you know, I can actually teach them to drink responsibly.
Yes, and that brings me to the next point in regards to some of the excuses that we use as parents. You know, I don't want to be too strict with my child. I want to be the cool parent. I want to be the point of reference. So I want to be the person who will introduce them to this alcohol world, because I know at some point they will get into it. So let me just introduce them to it to try and control the situation. Nimbaye kamoja, we go drink with them. Is this advisable, especially for our teens and youth?
It's not advisable because, one, this is a growing brain.
Yeah.
In the previous sessions we talked about, this brain continues to grow until the age of 25. Yeah. The last part of the brain that grows is the part responsible for executive functions, you know, higher decision making and so on. So that means that they have already not reached that stage of doing that. Yeah. And if you are going to provide the alcohol and even a place to drink it, the children then become more comfortable with it. Yeah. Comfortable with it, that they will still get to that level of binge drinking and so on. So it means that even when you are not there, yeah, they can easily bring their friends and really go overboard. And you have heard of situations where children do that. You know, we've just had cases of children using an ambulance and so on.
I know.
Yes, yeah. So what happened? First of all, they are teenagers.
Yeah.
Are they working?
No.
They are not working. So it means that somebody gave them money. Who gave them the money? Most likely the parent. Yeah. If you are going to teach about rules, we've talked about this before. If you're going to talk about those rules, did you also remind them about curfew? Probably not. Did you talk about the fact that, first of all, you have already endorsed drinking? In fact, that is a typical example of what we are talking about. You have already endorsed drinking. But look at their lack of responsibility in it. That is why they are inside the ambulance. They can even take a selfie and post it, you know. Already the lack of the skills are there. And as a parent, you have endorsed. Because how did they even get into the ambulance? You know, as a parent, if as the story goes,
you made it available.
You made it available. You know, you actually broke the rules, called the ambulance to go and pick a patient who happens to be your child, and you know very well that this child is not, it's not a patient. And then they come with your friends and they just blow you up, you know, by putting it on social media for everybody to see and show how, as a parent. That's why we were talking about parenting styles.
And exactly, as we bring this conversation to a close, what does that say about, you know, the parenting styles that we are employing? Because as we had said, you know, it doesn't always have to be one way of parenting. It's a matter of borrowing from different styles to try and bring out the best in your child. Maybe as we close the conversation, you can just re-emphasize on the whole importance of parenting styles in this day and time.
The fact that you need to provide your child with routines and also know that there are consequences to what you do.
Yes.
Because if you never get them to learn about consequences, then you end up with children who are growing up with a sense of entitlement. Yeah, I can do this and my parent will get me out of it. Remember when we talked about, oh, as a child you are the boss. So you decide what then happens.
Permissive, being too permissive.
That is being too permissive, and it's going to destroy your child. Because if they progress like that, it means they fail to get the skills.
Yes.
And as they do that, then they're not going to become better adults. Yeah. And if they manage to finish school and so on, then it means even the workplace is going to have a bigger problem. So that is why it is very important that you actually talk to your children and let them know. And as they grow from one stage to another, you know, like I think in the next one we'll talk about how do you hold these conversations.
Yes.
Yeah. So you don't wait until they get into teenage. It's something that you start early and you do that progressively.
All right.
And maybe as parents are home now, they could do a little experiment and ask their children, what kind of parent am I?
The answers you will get.
Just get feedback from them, and then that probably will help you to see where do I need to improve as a parent.
Could be getting eye-opening responses from our children. So once again, as parents, do not be too permissive, do not be too strict, do not be too authoritarian. Just try and find a balance so that you don't set your child up for failure much later in the future when they are in a place where you are not involved to bail them out. All right. So look at some of these parenting styles, see how you can best employ, and remember this starts by analyzing yourself as a parent and understanding which style of parenting you employ the most, and see how you can borrow from these other different styles to ultimately even help yourself have these conversations with your child about alcohol and all these other substances that are very readily available, especially now with dialer delivery. You might not even know when they're being delivered. So open that channel of communication as a parent and ultimately arrest the situation before it's too late. We have been speaking with Susan Maua, who is the acting manager in charge of public education and advocacy working with NACADA. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you this morning. Now remember, we continue with this series of discussion next week, where we'll be looking at those conversations with your children. So do keep it here to catch up with all that and so much more. But for now, we take a quick breather. Mr. Director, are we taking a break? Ama tunaenda tukiendanga? All right, we take a quick break. We'll be right back with more of Good Morning Kenya. Do stay with us. The hashtag is Good Morning Kenya.